Hello and welcome back to my studio. It's Lois here from Lois and Morgana Davidson Art, and today I'm going to be showing you how I go about sketching for a watercolour line and wash painting. And my subject today is this beautiful boat. This is a photograph that I found on Pixabay. As you can see, it's quite an arty photograph. It looks almost like a painting already. And I'll try to remember to put a link in the description below to this photograph so that you can have a go at sketching it yourself. Pixabay, of course, is a royalty-free site, so it's a great place to go for reference photographs to practice sketching. Today's demo focuses on the foundational skills of sketching and drawing, but I thought I'd quickly show you what I ended up with. All I had to do was splash a bit of paint onto the drawing once I'd got a good firm foundation for my painting. And whether you're wanting to paint pure watercolour or line and wash using an ink outline like this, it's really important to develop sketching and drawing skills in order to be able to portray your subject matter convincingly. And it doesn't matter if you think that you can't draw or sketch. It's a skill that anybody can learn. It just takes a bit of practice, a bit of application, and it takes you being willing to not be very good to start with, but to develop your skills over time and through practice. And if you like my painting process and if you enjoy the way I approach things, you might be interested in my book, Landscapes in Watercolour. It's available to purchase from all good bookstores, and there are 5 line and wash projects in there, as well as a 4-step process for completing the shading for line and wash. So take a look at the links below if you think you might be interested. So today I'm using Saunders Waterford cold press watercolour paper, and it's taped to my board, and my board's at an angle of about sort of 20 to 30 degrees. And I'm using the back of an old painting today. And I'm afraid I can't remember the grade of pencil that I used. It's most likely an HB, a B or a 2B. If you're a complete beginner, I'd recommend starting with something like an HB pencil. I'd recommend avoiding a pencil that's either too soft or too hard. Too soft and the lead will smudge and it'll sort of be difficult to keep your line work clean, and too hard and you're in danger of indenting the paper. But I think it's quite good to have maybe a range of a few different pencils, because it's all down to personal choice and your personal style of drawing and sketching. And the more you sketch and the more you experiment, the more you'll discover the grades of pencil or the type of pencil that suits you best. So the first thing I'm doing here is roughing out the shape of this boat. I'm trying to keep the proportions right, but I'm also bearing in mind that the front of the boat on the left is closer to us than the rear of the boat. So there's a little bit of perspective here. And for this, I'm not bothering to draw out lines of perspective for this, but I am looking very closely at my reference. And instead of trying to just draw what I think I see, I'm drawing exactly what I see. It's much larger or broader at the front where it's closer to us, and it goes back to being quite small as the boat sort of recedes into the distance as it's angled away from us. Now this effect is called foreshortening, and it's this where beginners can become a bit of a cropper sometimes. So careful observation and drawing what you see and not what you think you see is really important. And you don't have to get the outline all in perfectly in one go. Scribbly, sketchy lines. You can see that I sort of move my pencil back and forth when I'm drawing lines. And of course, I forgot to mention that this film is speeded up because the sketching and drawing process can take quite a while. And this video would have ended up being really long if I'd kept it at real time. But you can see that my line work for sketching is literally that. It's very sketchy, moving my pencil backwards and forwards, trying out several different lines until I sort of plump on the right line. You can erase as you go with an eraser if you put in any wrong lines. But it doesn't really matter with a sketch like this. The construction lines, in other words, the lines that you put in that aren't quite right, that actually help you to get the right line in position, can actually make a really interesting part of a sketch like this. You can see that now I'm starting to put in a few more details because the shape of my hull is looking sort of more rounded. There's some darker areas that are actually giving the sketch a bit more shape and form, and by drawing in the cabin of the boat at a slight angle, again observing the way that it's angled in the photograph, and then getting in just the simplest of shapes on the deck and around the boat, I'm starting to give some suggestion of sort of 3D-ness and shape and form. And because I can't really see everything clearly that's on the deck of the boat, and some of the planks and things that are leaning up against it, I'm pretty much making this up as I go along. I'm putting in sort of the suggestions of things on deck. Now I'm using an eraser pencil here, so it's the same as an ordinary pencil, but instead of a lead it's got an eraser running through it, and I can use that just to draw with the eraser through some of my pencil marks, and that helps me to create my ropes. I'm pulling my ropes in front of the boat itself, so I can erase a mark through the planking or through some of the shaded areas with my eraser pencil. And of course, this brings those areas forward so that we begin to build up this more sort of 3D shape. Again, adding the darker values builds up the 3D shape as well, especially at the back of the boat underneath where it's in deep shadow. Don't worry if it takes you a while to really get into sketching. If you haven't done much drawing, it can seem quite daunting, quite intimidating. But just, I think, as I've said before, give yourself permission to be not very good at sketching to start with. Like all skills, we have to start at that base point. And of course, the only way we can improve is by practicing, just like we would with something like a musical instrument. It's the same with sketching, and you'll be surprised at how quickly your sketching skills develop, and especially your skills of observation, because that's the most important thing to learn, is really looking at your reference like an artist, so that you're looking at shapes, you're looking at tonal value shifts, the shadows, where the light hits. You're looking at things that will help you to give a clue as to the shape of what you're drawing. In this case with my boat, the planking on the hull, that gives the boat shape and form just with those simple lines. And of course, the direction of the ropes helps me to give a really nice dynamic sort of composition to this drawing as a whole. So here's the finished drawing. And of course, you could paint directly over the drawing and it will be a pencil and wash. Again, another type of line and wash, which maybe I'll be covering in future episodes. But I think doing a pen and wash and using waterproof ink, in my case I'm using waterproof fine liners, is a really nice, easy way to develop your pencil sketch and the tonal values that you've created. And to get that toned down, and then all you need to do is just put a few washes of watercolour just gently and softly across your drawing, and you'll find that it looks painterly and really beautiful. And don't worry about being too neat, even though of course you can't erase an ink fine liner. It still won't matter if you make a few mistakes, put in a few wrong lines. Remember that this is a sort of a sketchy technique. It doesn't need every line to be perfect. in fact, if every line was perfect, we'd end up with a lifeless, sort of fairly dead drawing, whereas this is a sort of a lively, sketchy drawing, and there's life in it, there's energy, and we're trying to maintain that by still carrying this sort of sketchy line work into the ink drawing and not being too concerned about maybe getting a few lines wrong here and there. That just adds to the character of it. And the more you sketch, the more confident your sketching will become. You'll know exactly the kind of pressure you need to put on your fine liner to get a certain strength of line. You'll actually understand that if you take the pressure off your fine liner in places, you can get a nice dotted line, a sort of a hit and miss line, which can give some great effects. And that, as I say, it really doesn't matter if, say, every plank isn't evenly spaced, as long as they're looking roughly right, and then you've got the tonal values in the right place. The drawing will be convincing and full of character, and it makes it quite a simple matter to then just add a bit of colour and create a painting using this line and wash style. And remember, there's no wrong or right way to sketch or to create line work like this. And the more you practice, you will suddenly begin to see your own style developing in front of your eyes. Yes, you do have a style. You just need to bring it out through practice. Your style is as unique as your handwriting. And the more you sketch, the more you draw, the more you make decisions about the kind of marks that you use to interpret a certain visual effect. This is what will then develop into your style. I think that your style is simply the sum of the choices that you make as you create art in the way that you want to. And this is why I think it's so important to develop independent sketching and drawing skills for watercolour landscape painting, because you're developing your own style. And I think what frustrates so many artists is that if they simply stick to painting along with demos and tutorials, they are sort of trying to imitate the style of another artist. And this is often why they can feel frustrated. But if you develop your own skills, you'll begin to develop your own style. And that's such an exciting thing to do. So now for the final parts of the line work, I've changed to a chisel tip fine liner. Still waterproof ink, but it's got a 1.8mm chunky nib, and it helps me to put those darks in really quickly, exactly where I need them. And you can see how suddenly putting in these final dark values has really brought this drawing to life. I can go back to my fine liner and just kind of very lightly drag it across the hull just for some shading here and there. Just deepen up a few of those darker areas. And of course you could take a drawing like this to a much more finished, polished drawing if you choose to. That's purely just a matter of taste, is how far you take your drawings, how much detail you add or how much you leave out. But here's my finished line work drawing ready to paint. And let's go back to the photograph. You can see I've left out a lot of details, a lot of the damage on the hull, etc., etc. Those were the choices that I made. And that's an important part of learning to sketch, is making your own choices for the way you want to simplify the image in front of you. Now here's my painting. You can see that I've just splashed across some very muted washes. I've used some spatter drops to create character and texture. I've tried to sort of maintain that kind of vintage, old-fashioned feel of the photograph, but interpreting it in my own way. But with the line work done as convincingly as it is, you could just as easily have a beautiful blue sky and a perfect sandy beach. And you could even have a much better conditioned boat. Just paint it that way if that's what you prefer. So take the time to build that firm foundation in sketching and drawing, and then you'll find that you'll have the confidence to really bring your artistic and creative ideas to life on the page. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed that, then please click on the thumbs up and maybe consider subscribing to our channel if you haven't already. It really helps with our sort of reach with the YouTube algorithm, and it's free to do. And if you'd like to offer a bit more support to the channel, then why not hop over to Morgana or my Patreon pages, and we'll have the links for those in the description below, along with some links to my book. And thank you so much to everybody that supports us on Patreon. We couldn't run this free YouTube channel without you, and we appreciate each and every one of you. I'll see you again soon. Take care, and happy sketching and happy painting. Bye.